Closing the deal on their first podcast sponsorship is one of the biggest dreams of every podcaster. And in fact, saying those words, "this show is brought to you by," or "thanks to our sponsor," so many of us dream to say that. Yet the reality is that so many podcasters don't think that it's possible for them because they think that their show is too small to land those deals. And it couldn't be further from the truth, but what if I told you that right now where you are, you could create a very interesting package that a sponsor would say yes to? Well, this podcast episode is going to be covering how to land your first sponsorship deal, even though you may not have not even 1,000 downloads per month on your show. What do you say to a brand when you first email them so they actually reply? How many times should you actually follow up? And some really interesting methods that you can use time and time again to land those sponsorships. Now, I'm not going to be doing this episode by myself. I'm going to be having Justin Moore, who is a sponsorship coach and the author of Sponsor Magnet, How to Attract, Price, and Execute Your Dream Brand Partnerships. And so Justin has been involved in the sponsorship world for over 10 years. Not only he's done that, but he's landed over 1 million sponsorship deals for creators that he's worked with, which is super, super exciting. And so I want to tell you that this is the episode where you absolutely need your notebook. You're going to be listening to this time and time again because Justin, in his book and in this podcast episode, has released so many good takeaways specifically for podcasters and how we can leverage our podcast in a way that feels authentic and doesn't feel like it's stretching or scary. So I'm Xavier. I'm the founder of the podcast space. And as a podcast marketing and content strategist, I teach impact-driven entrepreneurs and leaders just like you to leverage their podcast in the most strategic way, practical and achievable, so that you can make your podcast dreams come true. Let's dive into this week's episode and welcome Justin.
What's going on? I'm so excited to be here.
I am very excited to have you. My audience was like, ask him this question. So for sure, if you're listening to this episode, make sure you stay until the end because I'm going to be asking audience questions. So Justin, biggest question that everybody has is, how soon can I start monetizing my podcast? How many downloads is too many, too few? Like, is there a way if I have less than 100 downloads per month to go there? Where do we start?
All right. I got great news for every single person listening. Wherever you're at, whether it's at 100 average, listens or downloads per episode or 100,000, great time to work with brands. And you want to know why? It's because what you pitch to the brand changes based on where you're at in your journey. So one of the things I talk about in my new book, Sponsor Magnet, is this concept called the sponsorship continuum. So when you are on kind of at the very beginning of your journey, and like I mentioned, don't have a ton of traction, you're getting couple hundred average downloads or something like that. If you were to reach out to a prospective brand partner and say, "Hey, I love your brand. I've been using it for 3 years. Let me talk about you on my podcast." They're going to take one look at your podcast, one look at your stats and say, not really going to move the needle for us. And a lot of podcasters get mad. They cross their arms. How dare they? I love their brand now. I used to love it. Now I'm a hater.
I spent money with you. You must love me.
Yeah, exactly. How dare you, right? Do they know who I am? This type of thing. But in reality, just like put your hat on. Imagine that you're the brand. Imagine that you have to spend, I don't know, 10, $20 million on marketing for that quarter or whatever. They have to take basically big swings. They can't do hundreds, thousands of these kind of micro partnerships to potentially get more people to sign up for their SaaS, their HR SaaS tool, or whatever niche you're in, right? And so if you can empathize with them and understand that there's a certain kind of threshold or floor that they need to entertain certain partnerships to ensure that it's actually going to meaningfully move the needle for their business outcomes. And so one thing that you need to have, this mental shift that you need to have when you're in the beginning, is like, okay, what I actually pitch to the brand needs to change if I want to work with these mid-tier and larger brands. So instead of saying, "Hey, let me talk about you on my podcast," you say, "Hey, okay, let me do actually like an audit of this brand's social presence out there on the internet. Do they have a podcast, like a podcast for their brand? Oh, they don't? That's interesting. Are they posting on social media? Oh, not really. They're posting once a month, and the things that they post kind of sucks. Okay, interesting. Do they have a blog? Do they have a newsletter?" Right? And so you do this kind of audit of their presence on the internet, and then you approach them and you say, "Hey, look, I actually think you could be telling your brand story in a more compelling way. I would actually love to create a podcast for you. I'll be the host. I'll interview your marketing people. I'll interview my friends who are in this industry. I will stand all this up for you, or maybe I will create a newsletter for you. I will create a blog for you. I will create content for your social media for you to repurpose. And guess what? Oh, by the way, go look at my podcast because that serves as my portfolio. So there's so many brilliant reasons that this is useful in the beginning, because number one, the amount of money that you can charge this brand now is completely detached from how many downloads you're getting on your podcast, because that's not what you're pitching them. And a lot of people think that brands have it all figured out, right? Oh, they've got the big marketing teams. They're hiring the advertising agencies. Like, who am I, little old me over here with my podcast? What could I meaningfully contribute to their content strategy? And my answer is a lot, especially if you have deep subject matter expertise in a specific area. And so this is the very beginning of the continuum. Now, let's say you grow a little bit, right? Now you're getting thousands of downloads per episode, let's say. Okay. Yeah, maybe what you pitch to the brand is a combination. You're creating content for them to use. Maybe you're doing some consulting for them. And yeah, maybe posting doing an integration on your podcast starts becoming pretty meaningful for them. Okay, now we're at the very end of the continuum, right? You're crushing it. You're getting tens of thousands of downloads or whatever. Yeah, the primary thing that you do and pitch them is, let me do some integrations, mid-rolls, pre-rolls on my podcast. That's going to be super meaningful. And that's all I'm going to pitch you. And so I think this is a really helpful framework, regardless of where you're at. Thinking about where you're on the continuum will help you realize what and when to pitch.
I loved so much of what you said. I want to reel it back for a second, because something you mentioned in your book, and this is something that I know from experience, from doing it myself, and especially like doing it myself and then coaching clients, because I think it's important to go through it to know. So a lot of your experience has been with so many big brands, but I think that there's also some value on pitching smaller brands and looking at you as like a partner. And that's something that you mentioned on your book. Instead of being like, hey, give me money, how can I be a partner to your success? And I find that, especially when I was working in a podcast studio as a producer, I would have so many hosts that they had incredible connections to, like, maybe someone was a realtor and they talked to their title company. Normally title companies have a lot of money. And so the title company was like, we have no time to create a podcast, but we'll be a sponsor of your show. And so without even launching, this host already had like the whole podcast paid for by the lending company. And so I think that podcasters and creators in general need to think about, like, okay, before you actually go to big brands who you already know in your vicinity that could be leveraging your skill set as a host, right? Because you were talking about like, what can you offer? And people think I'm just doing this show, but like so many people don't want to get into podcasting. They want to be associated with a cool kid. And then at the same time, it's like maybe they have a skeleton team, right? To your point about like, they don't have it all figured out. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, well, a very important corollary to the continuum that I just discussed is how much more powerful your leverage is when you have a more niche subject matter that you're talking about in your show. Let me tell a story. So one of my coaching clients, her name is Dr. Alex, and she has a podcast called Digital Pathology Place. So she's a veterinarian. She's a doctor, okay? And she nerds out over this topic around digital pathology. Who knew, right? And so she's not getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of downloads a month on her podcast. She's getting, on episodes, she's getting hundreds or thousands per episode, right? But who's in her audience? It's the lab techs, it's the doctors, the other veterinarians, the people at these medical device companies, right? It's the composition of her audience that's very interesting, because if you look over here at the medical device companies or the biopharmaceutical companies or whatever, who have $20 million to spend in their marketing budget, and they're sitting here thinking, how do we spend this money? Well, we could advertise in this like prehistoric trade magazine that sits in the doctor's office that no one reads, that we've advertised in for 20 years. Do people read it? I don't know, maybe, but let's just keep doing it, right? Google ads, maybe. I don't know. Am I going to reach doctors or decision makers at hospitals or clinics or whatever with those ads? I don't know. Oh, you know what we could do? We could go over here. Dr. Alex, she's got this podcast with this like hyper niche focused audience. Let's roll out the red carpet for her. Let's fly her out to our facilities, interview people on our marketing team. Let's have her speak on stage on our behalf at like major trade conventions, right? And so she's absolutely crushing it with brand partnerships because of this very reason, where it's like, if you can find these companies, these brands out there who, like you said, may be more traditional. There may be kind of more like the incumbents where they really have never done this type of partnerships before. I think surprisingly, a lot of my clients are B2B, very, very specific focused, niches. I just wrote a case study for one of my clients who has a government contracting newsletter. Got a $50,000 brand deal.
Wow.
For a government contracting newsletter. And so I think a lot of people think of influencer marketing or brand deals as like, oh, I got to be a lifestyle influencer on Instagram or dancing on TikTok or something. I'm like, no. Like the more niche you are, B2B, hyper specific, there's a lot of dollars out there if you can do it correctly.
Yes. And oh my gosh, I love that story. And it shows like the possibility, the breadth of opportunities. And I think that to what you're saying a lot on this book is like, don't be lazy. Don't shoot out emails without doing your homework. And really putting in the work to figure out like how is the market. And I feel like sometimes, yes, there's a lot of people sending out emails, but again, you have to have the confidence to actually send that first email. And I think that people are so afraid of rejection, or the other side, they're so afraid of actually what happens when the brand says yes. Oh, shoot, now I have to figure out pricing. I have to figure out like, what do I say? And yes, sure, we have ChatGPT, but at the same time, like I'm going to say, I was reading through your books. This episode is going to basically like go buy Justin's book. But truly, like you have the scripts here, because I think that a lot of people, something that they are like unsure of, like, what do I say? How do I negotiate? They're so afraid of like messing it up, right? Looking through your scripts here and thinking about like, how can you have a conversation with a brand and not being afraid to niche down too much. That's going to be great. You mentioned in the first part, budgets. I don't think people understand how budgets works. I would like it for you to kind of like unveil a little bit about like how budgets work and timelines, because I think that sometimes people like send emails and think, yeah, we're going to have a brand deal tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. So a bit of background about my history, basically, in this space. So my wife and I have been creators for over 15 years, started our first YouTube channel in 2009. So we've done hundreds and hundreds of partnerships ourselves personally, but I also ran an influencer marketing agency for about 7 years on the other side of it, so now I was actually helping get deals for other people. And so this afforded me a really interesting window into how these budgets are allocated and how the timeline of how these deals come together. And so what would oftentimes happen, let me share a quick anecdote to give you a sense of like what happens sometimes. So we would very frequently get RFP'd. So RFP means request for proposal. So other brands or other larger agencies would basically subcontract my company to run campaigns on their behalf. And they would oftentimes send this request out many, many, many months in advance ahead of the actual campaign, because they needed time to plan. They needed time to allocate budget to those types of things. So the furthest in advance that I ever got RFP'd for a campaign was 14 months, Anna.
Oh my
14 months. So literally they contacted me in January for a campaign the following March, not in 2 months, in 14 months. And so this is like an extreme example, but very frequently we would get RFP'd for campaigns 6 to 8 months in advance. Think about it from a large company's perspective. If they're spending $50 million in marketing across bus benches and billboards and TV ads and print magazines and social media and digital media creators, right? It is like complicated to deploy $50 million in marketing capital. It's not trivial. It's not like you go out there and spend that all on Facebook. Like you got to be thoughtful about all the different ways you're spending that. The places that you're actually deploying this capital have lead times too. So like a magazine, you have to buy that ad space many, many months in advance, right? And so it's just like you have to be a bit like thoughtful about, how complex it is for some of these brands to deploy this capital. And so this is why when you're actually pitching brands and reaching out to them, you have to reset your expectation about why you're pitching. One of the things I talk about a lot is like the point of a pitch is not to get a deal. The likelihood of you reaching out and them being in like an active planning or recruitment phase for a campaign is like super low. It's like less than 5%. When you reach out to them, the point of that pitch is to establish the relationship, to establish the conversation so that you are top of mind the next time. They're thinking and planning and recruiting for another campaign. And so this is just the very first entry point. And then you establish that relationship. Hopefully you can get on a phone call, establish some rapport, and then you put them into what I call your nurture sequence, so that every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, you're reaching back out, you're sending helpful news articles. Oh, did you see this? Did you see this? Oh, I just did this case. Here's a case study. I just did this. And so maybe you're going to have 3 or 4 touch points with them over a couple months. And then, oh yeah, we should reach out to Anna. We should reach out to Justin because we've got this campaign coming up.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about then which buckets can people pull from. I want to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about follow-up, because there's like how many times you should follow up until like you give up, or should you give up? But let's talk about like what are some different types of budgets that podcasters or creators can pull from.
Sure. So let's talk about how things first start at brands. So let's say you're a growing brand, you're smaller. Okay, maybe now you're more like medium size. The very first thing place that most brands start is let's send people free stuff. Let's send people free stuff and see if they'll talk about us, right? Whether it's a physical product, whether it's giving them access to our software for a year or extended subscription or whatever. That's the first method that people try, which is basically called product seeding. Okay. Critically though, the brand in those scenarios has very little control over whether people even talk about them or how they'll be talked about, right? Maybe this person creates a piece of content with the product and it's bad. It's like, oh, they demonstrated it incorrectly. They mispronounced the name of our brand or our product, right? And so once brands get that experience where it's like, okay, we got a few people like to talk about us, but it's not a scalable strategy because you can't guarantee that someone's actually going to talk about you, et cetera. And so once brands graduate out of the product seeding, or they realize, okay, we need to augment the product seeding thing with some other strategies, the next place they go is affiliate marketing. Okay, they say, okay, we are now going to compensate people every time they can generate a conversion, whether it's a sale, a trial sign up, whatever it is. And so again, this is preferable for the brand, right? Because they don't have to outlay any sort of upfront capital. They're going to have this army of people hopefully talking about them, and they only have to compensate them when they make a sale, right? Then they realize, okay, well, affiliate marketing is great, but again, like you cap out in terms of scalability there. And so it's okay, what if we really want to ensure that we have more creative control over the assets that are generated? We want to guarantee that this content goes live by a certain date. We want some additional rights to the content so that we can repurpose it as a brand. And so this is now where they start to think, okay, maybe it makes sense to compensate people with a flat upfront commitment so that they guarantee that there's kind of this like expectation on both parties that, hey, this person's actually going to send us a draft of this content, this ad read on the podcast or whatever, before it goes live, so that we can have some creative feedback and be like, hey, you mispronounced the name of the brand, or you didn't say the talking point right, or you this type of thing. And so the reason that it's so important to educate yourself as a podcaster about these different types of buckets is because you can be more creative during your negotiation to try to tap into some of these budgets. Another bucket that we didn't discover, and we're kind of getting into a next level strategy here, is the paid media budget. So oftentimes brands will have a separate budget to not only compensate you, that comes from kind of the talent or podcaster budget for the content creation or the integration, but also they're going to repurpose the content that you create. Maybe if it's a video podcast, especially, there's a lot of value in basically taking that 1 minute or 30 seconds that you talked about their brand, cutting that down into a 15-second, 30-second ad or whatever that they can repurpose on Meta ads or on YouTube TrueView or on TikTok Spark ads or whatever it is. And they will actually allocate additional money to the paid media effort, sometimes $50,000, $100,000 to running media behind a really compelling ad asset. And so again, it's like so important that you educate yourself around the terminology so that you can potentially tap into some of these additional budgets.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Love that. And then terminology.
Yes.
You and I were both talking about this before we hit record. You come to the table in such a better position to negotiate when you know the lingo. So what lingo does the creator need to know about?
So I have, there's a lot, but I'm going to try and keep it simple for today, the most important ones, okay? I have this framework that I talk about in my book, Sponsor Magnet, called the DUE rule. So DUE, okay? And this is the most important one when it comes to scoping what the deal looks like. So D stands for deliverables. What does the brand actually want you to create for them? Is it a pre-roll? Is it a mid-roll? Do they want you to do a dynamic ad insertion over your entire back catalog? Are you going to be interviewing someone on your podcast from their team? And how many? What's the quantity here? A lot of brands would be like, oh, we just want you to be an ambassador and you'll do a couple inclusions a month. And like, no, it's like, no, okay, we need to think quantity here. What exactly are we going to be doing? So that's the deliverables. The U in the do rule is the usage rights. As I mentioned a second ago, what does the brand want to do in addition to you doing a pre-roll, a mid-roll, an actual host-read ad on your podcast? Are they going to want to cut that down? Even if they're not bringing it up at the outset of the conversation, you should bring it up. You should say, hey, would you find value in repurposing this content in other ways to extend the mileage, extend the utility or the ROI of this partnership? So that's the usage rights. And there's a difference between organic usage rights, where they're just embedding it on their website or putting it on their social media, versus paid rights, where they're actually putting additional dollars behind the content. The E in the do rule is exclusivity. Some podcasters here who may have done some partnerships may be familiar. They may on what's called an insertion order. It'll say something like, hey, you can't work with any of our competitors for 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, a year. Like some of these contracts can get pretty crazy. And that represents a direct opportunity cost for you that you cannot work with. If a competitor approached you in 11 months and 29 days, you can't do that deal because you said to the previous brand that you wouldn't. And so again, you need to be pricing these things into your deal to ensure that you're protected.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. I think you're opening our listeners' mind in so many ways, because I think a lot of people don't think, wait, like they can actually take what I do and put it on an ad. Perfect time to segue into podcast, audio only, and video podcasting, and the potential for, because a lot of people say, okay, should I go to YouTube because there's more potential for ad dollars? Is that true? Justin, tell us.
Okay, so I have a pretty spiky take on here, which is that if you are a podcaster that did not have video in 2025, you're going to be left in the absolute dust. Because not only are audio podcasts inherently difficult to grow for discovery, there's no inherent discovery algorithm, really. I mean, kind of like suggestions and recommended podcasts and stuff on Spotify, et cetera. If you look at platforms like YouTube and Spotify now, which has video podcast, there are lots and lots of examples of podcasts that have grown significantly through investing in a clipping strategy, where they're taking 20, 50 clips from every podcast episode and just absolutely smashing those, uploading 20 a day or whatever crazy numbers. And yeah, all combined, they're not going super viral each clip, but like on a whole, it's
Overall,
growing the floor. It's growing the floor of that podcast. And to your point, if brand partnerships and sponsorships is a significant way that you are deriving revenue, it is infinitely more repurposable to have a video plus audio clip versus audio only in terms of running advertising. You know, if you have been on the fence of trying to decide whether this is something to invest in, and you needed someone to tip you over, here we go.
Yeah. And so many creators think like, oh, video, I'm scared. And it's kind of one of those things that I primarily work with minorities, multilinguals, and women. And so many women, for instance, are so scared to be on video. And I always say, like, if no one else in your industry is doing video, like literally that's the reason why. Or if you want more representation, like visual representation is so powerful to inspire other women, to inspire other people to do it as well. So you can be the leader. But for brands, they can connect deeper to you as a creator when they see what you can do. And you don't need 7 cameras. You can start with 1. But how much more powerful is to like hold a product to the camera? Like, it's so much better than just talking. Yeah, sure, you can paint a picture, but like so much better, because we want to talk about tracking as well. Podcasters need to expand how they market themselves and which channels they have, because attribution in podcasting is really difficult. So for a brand to realize, like, how do we track if people were interested in this campaign? It can take up to 6 weeks for someone to catch up on the whole like catalog, right? But what can be easier ways? What would be your suggestion for podcasters to land more deals?
So first and foremost, we need to do a mindset shift here for a lot of people, which is I think a lot of podcasters think that the only thing brands care about is conversions. All they care about is driving sales, driving trial signups, driving leads, app downloads, something like you said, attributable, trackable, measurable. And of course that's important, but that is just one of the 3 types of campaign goals that brands have. So something that I talk about in the book is what I call the ARC framework, ARC. So brand 100% of the time, brands will have 1, 2, or all 3 of these campaign objectives. And so it stands for A is awareness. So the primary reason that the brand wants to actually partner with you as a podcaster is just to kind of spread the word about a new feature, a new benefit, a product launch. They're available in a new territory. They were in the UK. Now they're available in the US. And so they just want to do a full court press, very top of funnel, get people aware of the fact that this thing is now in the market. So that's an awareness focused campaign. The second is a repurposing campaign. So we mentioned it that, when you say to them, hey, what would success look like to you? What would a win be if we partnered? And they say to you, we love your podcast and all, it's great, but the reason that we really want to work with you is to get the content, the integration that you do, and run ads with it, or to repurpose it on our social media, or put it on our blog, or whatever it is. And so ding, 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 in your mind, you should think, oh, great. That's a very different type of, I'm going to pitch them something very different, knowing that that's their objective, right? And then, C in the ARC framework is conversion, right? And so I think that this is like a really important thing to remember is that if you are leading as a podcaster with all your metrics, right? My downloads and my demographics and my click-through rates, you are leading the witness. You're assuming that the brand, that's what they care about, is conversion. And so a much more helpful exercise at the very outset of a conversation with the sponsor is to not do that, not send them your media kit right away as a boilerplate. Oh yeah, here's my media kit, right? Or not have a place on your website where they can click here and book a spot without even talking to them. It's to say, great, this sounds really cool. Preferably it'd be like, I'd love to hop on a call. And the first question that you ask them on that call is, tell me what success would look like to you. What is your goal? What would a win look like for you? And brands are going to tell you wildly different things, every single brand. And so this is always where you need to start, because you are going to basically need to pivot according to what the brand says.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much good stuff here, Justin. I think that for our listeners to think about, like, it's not just about your audience. You can also focus on how you can be the leader, right? But you also can help the brand figure out stuff that they're missing out. Like something that I did for a brand was actually to go through their website and realize they didn't have anything on analytics, podcast analytics. I'm like, that's what I do. So I was like, great, let's collaborate and create assets. So sometimes for us as creators, we can leverage brand association to leverage our position in the market. So maybe you don't make money, but how the audience perceives you is kind of like a bigger creator. And so again, you need to have meat to this all, right? You need to have your expertise, but sometimes it can be a stepping stone and not going into the conversation with assumptions. I think that is really good, because you mentioned that a few times, go to the brand and have open conversations, not just go and assume this is what you need, right? Let's do this like this.
The other thing I want to say, this is really important, is that taking a stance and basically thinking I think your brand needs to do this. That is very powerful, because as long as you're not tearing them down and being you suck, your strategy sucks. But basically I could share another story. So one of my coaching clients, pretty large in the podcast and kind of software tech space. And there's this one tool that he uses for podcasts. And he has been a diehard user of this tool for a long time. And we were talking, and he came to my in-person event, Sponsor Games, last month. And we were talking about this at the event. He was like, there's this one software, I really want to pitch them. And specifically, I think that their tutorials suck. There's specific ways in which I use their tool that they don't have any demo videos for in their knowledge base. And I was like, bro, pitch that. This is a perfect idea. And so literally we designed this pitch where it was he basically said, I want to make a bunch of tutorials for your knowledge base. And he was very specific about it, right? And I have this pitching methodology that we can talk about that we kind of structured it around. But he basically said, I want to do this for you. It's going to be this much money. He sent it to them, and they said, great, send the contract over. And he signed it, $13,000. So,
nice.
So it was just think about it from the brand's perspective. It's like plug and play. It's yeah, you identified you're right. Like, we need these videos. You have credibility. You're a user. We trust you. You have this great YouTube channel, podcast, or whatever, so we know that you're legit. So where do we sign, right? It's like kind of this turnkey thing for brands. And I think a lot of podcasters are sitting on their hands waiting for brands to come to them with these ideas. But like, honestly, like, that brand may never have even known that you'd be interested in doing something like this for them, right?
Yes. Oh gosh. Like I want to use this clip. I'm like, everybody, listen. I love those points. It's just also like really gives you agency as a creator to really think about like not being pigeonholed to like what you think you should be creating. Oh, UGC or like an ad or whatever. It's like you actually can create and leverage your expertise in a way that benefits the brand and you, because you're going to tap into that audience. And so thinking strategically and like, how can you be different than the audience? Again, all comes back to doing the homework. I don't know if everybody's listening, but like really thinking beyond the basic. Can
I pull one thread real quick of something you just said, which I think is really important? There may be some folks who are listening or watching thus far, and they're kind of sponsorship skeptics. They're like, okay, yeah, I get it. But the real reason that I have my podcast is lead generation for my coaching business or my courses or my service business or something like that. I'm not really in it just to do sponsorships. I really want to just get more clients, right? And I understand that. And so first of all, I appreciate that you're still listening. But the second thing that I want to say is, like, how powerful would it be if you could tap into a brand's customer base to get more clients for yourself? Okay, because this is what I'm doing. I've got my freaking book right here, Sponsor Magnet. And you know what I'm doing right now? My strategy for 2025 and 2026 is, how can I tap into these brands, these creator economy company, these podcast tool companies? They've got a user base of 100,000 people. How can I get a copy of the book in every one of those customers' hands? And so the deals that I'm negotiating, the deals that I'm structuring now is like, how can we make this a win-win? Yeah, I'll talk about you on my platform. I'll talk about in my podcast, social media, newsletter, whatever. But hey, guess what? As part of this deal, you need to do 5 newsletter blasts to your base about this webinar that I'm going to do with you, or my book or my program or whatever. Because again, it's a win-win. Like, look, brands are so sick and tired of talking about themselves every single day. This is what they do. Oh, a new feature, a new benefit. Okay, another newsletter about us on our Instagram. You know how excited they'll be to be like, hey, we're doing a webinar in partnership with Justin Moore from Creator Wizard. He's a sponsorship coach. He can help you grow your business, make more money, etc. They're stoked to do stuff like that, right? And so I just think it's like unleashing your creativity when it comes to realizing, like, it's not just about lining your pockets with some cash when you do a sponsorship. You can structure these partnerships in really, really interesting ways that'll benefit your business multifold.
Yes. And funny enough, that's exactly what I've done. I mean, I've done affiliate marketing, but like the biggest money has been converting customers from these partnerships, from webinars that I've done with Riverside, with Captivate, with Asha. Like that, to me, like a client came to me and it was a $5,000 coaching client, because she was like, oh, I heard you for 2 minutes on this webinar.
Let's go. You did. Okay, hold on. Some more. Let's go. Come on. You didn't know this was coming, right? I had to break out the soundboard.
Yes,
for that.
because you do a lot of live. Actually, I appreciate the sound effects.
Yeah.
But yeah, like thinking long term, thinking wide about the opportunities, the potential opportunities. And so there's a few more things that I want to make sure that we cover before.
Yeah.
We go into listener questions, but you were talking about your framework. So let's talk about that framework that you were mentioning earlier.
Okay, so I call it the R.O.P.E pitching method. Okay, I talk about it in basically chapter 1 of my book. And so R stands for relevant. Your pitch has to be relevant to a campaign that the brand is either currently running or has run in the past. O stands for organic, meaning that you can tie your pitch back to organic work that you've already published that illustrates that your audience has an affinity for their brand. Not that you do, that your audience does. P stands for proof, so you can show how you've helped other brands achieve results. And E stands for easy to execute. When the brand says, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting, what did you have in mind? And so actually, let's just YOLO, Anna, and do a real example of this. Let's get your podcast sponsored. So give me a dream brand that you would really love to collaborate with, and we'll walk through a R.O.P.E pitch for this brand.
All right, Podcast Movement. Okay. Which you and I both spoke at.
I think that's like the first place we met, right?
Yeah.
I think it might have been. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen here. I'm kind of YOLOing here. So if you want to see this, go to the YouTube or wherever this is going to be. And I'm going to.
Hang on, because this is, we're just, can you share?
I think I can. Yeah, why not?
Okay. Oh, there you go.
So what I did is I pulled up Podcast Movement's website. Okay. And I want to start, first of all, seeing what is important to them. So Above the Fold, the signature tentpole event that they have every year is in Dallas this year, August 18th to the 21st. Okay. So this is what we're going to pitch Podcast Movement, right? We're going to say, hey, depending on when this goes live, right? We're sitting here, time of recording in April. This is about 4 months in advance. So ticket sales are still top of mind for them. You're going to say Dallas Podcast Movement integration, ? That's the name. This is what they care about is ticket sales right now. This is one example. That's like a very easy one for the relevancy, right? Other things that I want to do to know is like they've got these Evolutions satellite events around the country. So it would be interesting to know when their next one is. So this is, okay, so Evolutions happened a couple weeks ago. So that's probably not the best pitch right now. But like one of the points of this relevancy exercise as we're looking at the brand's Instagram is realizing that we need to be thinking several months out. Remember, we talked back to the timeline thing earlier where we were like, hey, if we're sitting here pitching them in April, we can't be trying to, talk about something that's like happening right now. They baked that campaign, that marketing campaign many, many months ago. And so I want to know what do they care about in August, September, the fall, holiday? Like, are they running, maybe they're running some sort of last year, right? Maybe we scroll back on their Instagram and saw that they were doing some sort of holiday themed 12 days of holiday, giveaway for the next year's event or something. That would be the subject line. Oh, 12 days of Podcast Movement in 2026? ? That's the subject line of the email, not podcast collaboration. They don't care. Like, how many podcasters are pitching them to promo their event? Lots and lots and lots. And so realizing some specific promotion, some specific hashtag that they used, some campaign that they ran, that's what we care about. Okay. And then so that's the R in the R.O.P.E method. And so the O, the organic, is you are literally linking to a podcast episode where you talked about the value of in-person events for podcasters. And if you don't have, okay, so if you have that episode, that's what you link. But if you don't have that episode, you make it in advance of pitching them. So this is where you need to be a bit more intentional about your podcast strategy, about your episode strategy. It's still going to provide a lot of value to your listeners, obviously, but it's going to serve this double purpose of knowing that you're going to pitch this brand in a month or in 6 weeks or something like that, right? The P is proof. So, hey, this is how I've helped this other VidFest or PodFest drive ticket sales or whatever in 2024, 2025, something like that. And the E, the easy to execute part, is where you're actually pitching them something. You're saying, hey, I'm going to do 5 podcast pre-rolls. I'm going to do a back catalog, dynamic ad insertion over my entire catalog for the next 30 days. I'll give you repurposing rights to the video clips. I'll give you 3 clips. Launch this within the next 10 days. Are you free on Thursday at 10 a.m. to talk about this? That is the pitch. It's not, hi, my name is Anna. I've got this podcast. I'm getting this many downloads per episode. I've been going to Podcast Movement for 3 years. I love it. Would love to figure out a way to collaborate, ? Choke me with the spoon, right? This is what's going to happen, right? It's going to be crickets. People are going to be snoring. The brand's going to delete your email. And then people convince themselves that pitching doesn't work. No, it's because you're talking about yourself. They don't know who you are. They don't care that you get a lot of downloads. You know what they care about? They care about themselves, their own initiatives. And let's do it for full circle here. That's what they have money for. They have budgets for their own initiatives. And so your job is to convince them like, hey, I seems like you got 200K to like spread the word on ticket sales, app downloads, trial signups, whatever it is. If you allocate 50K of that to me, I will help you move the needle on that business objective.
Yes, love all of this. And then something that we definitely need to talk about. Give me a second because I was there and then I forgot. ADHD brain. Okay, so that's awesome and kind of reminds me before we get into the listener questions, it's the how can we sell? Like, let's talk about some assets that we can think about.
So if you are listening to this as a podcaster in 2025 and the only thing that you can sell is more, is quantity. All you have is your podcast asset to sell. I want your primary goal for this year to introduce one other content format into your business, whether this is social media, whether this is a newsletter, whether this is a private community, whether this is an in-person event, whether this is a course, whether this is a book, whether this is something, some other asset that you can, of course, still serve your audience with. That's like a big part of this, is like realizing that they could learn in other ways. But that you have more leverage to design more complex packages when you are negotiating with some of these sponsors. And so for those of you who are skeptical of being like, look, Justin, I'm on the podcast hamster wheel right now. I'm barely getting these episodes out every week or every 2 weeks. I can't even think of like having an Instagram or having social media or newsletter or whatever. Let me speak in terms that might resonate with you. So when I started creating content, educating creators around sponsorship strategy, I am a YouTuber at heart. That was our first channel, 2009. Like, that's how we started. I consider myself a YouTuber. That's how we started. And so when I started doing this, I started making YouTube videos because that's my comfort level. And so what happened was people started watching these videos and saying, Justin, I really love your frameworks, but I would love to read more about it because I don't know, I'm not like, this is great, but like, I want to like read it. And so I said, okay, let me take the transcripts and make a blog. And so I made a blog. Then people said, Justin, I love the blog, but I'm not going to like, I don't want to like keep coming back to this site. Can you just like send it to me in the email? Like, and I said, okay, let me make a newsletter. Right. And then people say, oh, I love the newsletter, but you know what? And the videos, but I'm still in my full-time job and I just don't have time to watch these videos or read the blog posts, but on my commute, I would love to listen to it. And so, oh, let me make a podcast, right? And so I kept going, but it was because it was in response to what my audience was telling me. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I launched my in-person event sponsor games. And so I kept like kind of expanding the Creator Wizard cinematic universe, basically, into all these different content formats because everyone has different learning styles. And so if you still don't believe me or still are hesitant to like expand to another content format, don't do it for me. Don't do it for the sponsors. Do it for your audience, because I bet you anything that you could serve them in a slightly different way, entertain them, educate them, and you'll have an added benefit of another asset, another content format for you to serve sponsors.
Yes, and exactly what you mentioned is what I tell people. I mean, again, AI, we have that now, so there's no excuse, but we have to think about the user experience. And some people, to your point, they prefer reading emails. But I mean, if they prefer reading emails, maybe they're not going to go on social media. So you can repurpose, y'all. Like, stop being so precious about like, it all has to be different. It doesn't. It takes so many times, so many touch points for consumers to buy from us now. So it's just like, be smarter.
One more reason why I believe this is so important in the age of AI. If you go on ChatGPT or Perplexity right now, today, anyone can try this right now and search, who can I learn from to learn more about brand partnerships and brand deals? You know who comes up number one? Me. And you want to know why? I believe, I can't know this for sure, but it's because I'm everywhere. It's because I have the blog. It's because I've been interviewed on a bunch of shows. It's because I have a podcast, a YouTube channel, socials. And so I do think in the age, if you think about this nascent, this emerging field of AI SEO, I think a big part of being recommended as a top resource in some of these large language models is because of the fact that you have credibility in a lot of different content formats.
Yes. And for sure, the fact that people like your digital footprint is immense, and like that does matter. I remember what I wanted to ask you. The follow-ups. So you mentioned, this is like the last thing, Justin, before we get to the questions, I promise. So the follow-ups, I just kind of like get like in horror, in cringe when I see some follow-ups and some emails, because again, about the point, the me, it's all about me as a creator. And some emails literally are so devoid from like, what? They don't know who you are. Like, why would they reply? So we tackled how to send that first email, which what it should include. Let's go through some strategies to get brands to reply. But I guess at the core of this, like, how do you create a good follow-up strategy?
So let me quickly share an anecdote. So one of my coaching clients, her name is Emma. She's one of the largest cruising YouTubers. Okay. It's called Emma Cruising. You can look it up. She recently forged a deal with a brand from the fourth follow-up of them not responding. So she followed up 4 times, even though the brand wasn't responding. So a lot of people think of like, oh my God, I can't imagine shouting into the void like that over and over and over with no reply. But the point of is realizing like, number one, you're not annoying them if you are providing value in every follow-up. So what the big mistake that people make when they follow up is they just say, just wanted to bring this to the top of your inbox. Just wanted to follow up here. Do you have any campaigns for me? How about now? This type of thing. And so you're actively encouraging people to just like ignore you, primarily because the brand contact just doesn't have an update. Maybe they haven't talked to their boss, or there's someone's out of the office, or they're sick, or they haven't figured out the budget. And so they just don't respond. I feel as though I want everyone to be like me, which is like respond. And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, like I don't have any updates for you, right? But like a lot of brands are not like that. They just won't respond when they don't have any new information to share. And so really what I advise people to do is provide value in every email in the form of, so I have this framework that I call the Pinot method. Like I'm a big wine drinker. So Pinot, like Pinot Noir, P-I-N-O-T. And so you're doing different things at each touch point. So the first one is something that I call pivot. So if you provided one specific idea in your initial pitch email, you're now pivoting to a different idea, whether it's a different seasonal initiative. Maybe you found an article on an industry trade publication, Adweek, News, a Digiday, like some of these, whatever, maybe it's a specific industry trade for your niche. And you're saying, hey, did you see this article? Check out how this other brand over here that's kind of a competitor maybe is like working with creators or doing something. Would love to chat about this, right? And so every different touch point, you're providing something new. Maybe the next one is a case study. Oh, I just partnered with this brand. Here was the results. Here's a one-pager. Here's how I did it. Here's a testimonial from the brand of like what it was like collaborating with me. And so every time you're reaching out, you're actually saying something of interest, of value. And so by that third or fourth touch point, you better believe like they're finally going to be like, okay, let me get back to this person. Thank you so much. And so that anecdote that I shared with Emma on that fourth follow-up, the brand contact, all they said was like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's been so busy. I've been traveling. But this is perfect timing because we have this campaign. We'd love to talk. And now they're moving forward with the deal. So could you set that as a goal? Have that tenacity, have that humility, be very low ego about it. It's not because you suck. It's not because your pitch sucked. It's not because that your podcast sucks. It's because they're busy, and just realize that it's not no, it's just not yet.
Yes, love all of that. I am kind of guilty of sending the email, hey, just sending this to the top of your inbox. But normally it's not like a low pressure kind of environment. But I'm guilty of that. So thank you. I'll take that note. I always go for another strategy, Justin, because sometimes my email is a dumpster fire. So I resonate with people. So I actually go down the route of social media and befriending on LinkedIn or like connecting to the decision makers of those brands and staying on top, like engaging with their content, on commenting, because it feels less yucky to me to go kind of like, oh, here I go and air quotes annoying them again. So it feels like I'm like providing value and being on their sphere without like poking at them. But like that's to me what works. Is there another strategy that you would recommend that is non-inbox related that would be like maybe left field?
Anna, this is such a great piece of advice, and absolutely I recommend as well, primarily because I think email feels more high stakes. Like email is the traceability. It's like the track record of the formal business relationship. But on social media, I have found that I will have an email from someone sitting in my inbox, but they'll like DM me on LinkedIn or something and I'll respond within like 5 minutes. Cause it's just like, right. It's just like, it feels like low stakes. It's like, yeah, I'll just like hit you back versus the email, which is like, I have to like think about this, like set aside time in my mind to like think about how I'm going to respond to this. And so it's a really, really good piece of advice. One more idea, you mentioned this kind of out of left field idea. One thing that I've done with a lot of effectiveness is offer to do a lunch and learn for someone's team, where I actually have gone in and done this physically in offices, actually back in the day. Yeah, where I would go and I'd be like, hey, I actually catered the lunch or coffee or cookies or something. And literally this was at an agency. And so I got 20 of all the different department heads, like all the account executive for the various brands. My wife and I came in and we just kind of talked about like what we're seeing on the ground as YouTubers, talking about what it's like, influencer marketing. This was back in the day. And so we had this like captive audience of like all the decision makers at this agency. And all we had to spend was a couple $100 to cater some coffee and pastries and stuff. And like, we ended up getting literally multi 6 figures of business from that one initiative, because who wouldn't want to like go and like meet some creators and like for an hour and like this type of thing. You could do this virtually too. You could do this over Zoom. You could be like, hey, would love to kind of chat, tell you what I'm seeing as a podcaster, as a newsletter operator, short form creator, whatever your expertise is. Wow, super, super valuable for the right person.
I love that. That's so strategic, but also at the same time, I always go, whatever you do, talk about it online, because a brand can see that you're doing that for another brand and they reach out to you. So
totally.
Never go at it like be the best kept secret. Like stop, like toot your own horn.
Oh my God. So totally. Every time I do a webinar, I will literally, right before I'm about to go, I have my slides up on this screen and I go like this. I do a selfie right in my studio here with the lights and the name of the webinar and everything. And I post it, about to do this webinar with blah, blah, blah. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that for my courses, for my coaching, for the webinars. And that will lead to other opportunities when people see that I'm like doing that, you know?
And it's the behind the scenes. So like, oh, how does Justin spend his days? Like it's kind of tapping into that like Big Brother reality TV kind of thing that people are like, they're so like nosy. All right. So we're now finally, thank you for sharing that. We're going to go into the listener questions. We're going to do kind of rapid fire because we're going and thank you for being so gracious with your time, Justin. All right, so let's go into the first one. How can podcasts on climate/environment, that is a very content niche, break through the competition?
Okay, so if it's a podcast on climate, this has been a challenge for a lot of nonprofits that have reached out to me, where there is some sort of larger, maybe social issue or climate related issue or something, where the sponsors that they ideally would love to have, they're fighting for the charitable budget. The DEI, they're fighting for like a small sliver of that the brand allocates to these types of things that they look at as charitable, right? And what I advise people in these situations who have causes or podcasts around these topics to think, no, that's not the budget you're going after. You're not going to go after the single rounding error budget that they're allocating to these things. You are going after the business budget, the objective, like I talked about earlier, where you're saying like, okay, what does the brand care about right now? You know what they care about? The fact that they introduced this new AI tool into their software, into their whatever, you know, whether, I don't know what brand it is that this climate podcast is targeting, but like, what is the business outcome that their VP of marketing talked about on the fireside chat at Davos or something? I don't know. Right. And you're saying, hey, I can help you move the needle on that initiative by sponsoring my climate podcast. So it's not like, please, sir, can I have some more? Like, you know, like begging them to give you like a sliver of a budget. No, it's like, hey, let me move the needle on this business objective. And so that is a very, very important mindset shift if your podcast has that type of focus.
Love that. All right, next one. What advice would you have for a local/regional/state show in securing sponsors?
Okay, so I have quite a few hyper local creators in my coaching program. One of them, I'll give them a shout out, is called Cincy Scoop. It's Cincinnati. So they have an Instagram page and a local newsletter all around the happenings of like what's going on around Cincinnati, local events, shows, new businesses, things like that. And they are freaking crushing it because think about it. They are not going after the gigantic, like multinational conglomerate type brands, but they are crushing it with brand partnerships because every event that passes through Cincinnati, right, whether it's a concert, a tour, something, they're out there thinking, okay, what media can we buy to spread the word about this event that's coming up? The local radio, the penny saver, maybe Facebook ads targeting a geographic 25-mile radius around the zip code. And you know what? Oh, wow, there's this media publication that has 35,000 Cincinnati residents on it. Let's go and hire them, right? And so I think there's actually a huge amount of opportunity, not just with these tours and things like that, but also local service providers, realtors, CPAs, insurance agencies, the coffee chain that has 6 locations around your local community. All of those people would like more foot traffic or more business. And so figuring out, maybe it's not even like a flat rate partnership. Maybe it's what I talk about in the book. One of the pricing styles is a hybrid partnership where it's some sort of like flat upfront base kind of compensation to be included in your newsletter or your podcast or whatever every month, but there's some sort of performance kicker on the back end. So for every client that you send their way, there's some sort of lead cost, whether it's, you know, $200, $300, a percentage, whatever it is. And so there's a lot of creative ways, I think, as a hyper local podcaster to make lots and lots of money, I think.
Love that. I'm going to make one side note here. I have seen this happen and it works in as charms. Like basically you go to one person, and when you do that one deal, everybody is kind of like a little like, how did she do that? Blah, blah, blah. And then people want to copy it. And it's just like, you just need to get your first deal, because most people can't see that, like how that would look like. But once they see the outcome, once they see the product, they go, oh, I get it. And also I want that too. So it's a random thing, but sometimes just like that, getting that one person who's like super vocal in the community is the snowball effect, and everybody goes after that.
Well, another thing is like, don't underestimate like the fact that you might have potential sponsors in your audience.
Yes.
Like, why not do a call for sponsors in a podcast episode? Be like, hey, if you are someone who has a local business, or you have a brand or a business that you're trying to get in front of more XYZ, insert your audience persona, your audience psychographics, shoot me an email in the show notes. Like, I would love to chat. Like, I guarantee you probably have sponsors in your audience without even knowing it.
Indeed. All right. So we already had 2 questions. Another one. How do you know if a brand is a good fit for a collaboration?
So if the only criteria that you're using to determine whether a brand would be a good fit is if you like them, and that's like they're a good fit for you, that's a big problem, because you're making an assumption that your audience will also be into it. And so a big mistake that people make is not involving their audience in this process of learning more about what I call the psychographics, not the demographics necessarily. It's like, what's keeping them up at night? What problems are they having? What kinds of jobs do they have? Do they have kids? Like all these other kind of more complex, deeper questions that you need to be asking through literal surveys in the show notes. Like, hey, click here. I want to learn more about you. I'm planning out my podcast strategy for the next year. I want to make sure my episodes serve you. And including some of these questions in there will then give you the fodder to realize like, okay, this now gives me a much more useful lens to decide whether this sponsor will be a good fit, because I know it's going to serve them.
Absolutely. All right. Last one. Ask Justin for a script on how to upsell when a brand wants to test how a single newsletter ad performs. I love his holistic approach, but I did not read this before. I'm reading this to you. Oops. I love his holistic approach, but I'm not sure what to say about the single ad. The brand is my newsletter, and it didn't really get many clicks.
So here's where familiarizing yourself with some like important sales psychology principles as well as terminology helps. So there's this thing called the marketing rule of 7 that was developed in the 1930s by the movie studios. And they did a lot of extensive research that found that an average moviegoer needs to see a marketing message about the movie 7 times until they actually went and got their butt in the seat and bought a ticket. That same philosophy applies today, where it's like multiple touch points are needed to continue to emphasize with your listeners that you're continuing to love and use this product, that it's useful. You can talk about different features and benefits. And so telling that story potentially to a brand that hasn't really done much of this will start to educate them even about what's needed to actually be effective. So that's a really critical element of it. The other aspect too is drawing a parallel to other marketing methods that they're familiar with. So for example, if this brand is running paid advertising on Facebook, on Instagram, etc., they likely know that like you very rarely just make one piece of one creative, one video, one photo, and just like that's the only ad you run. Almost never, right? You're doing 20, 30, 50, 100 different swings to then figure out this one ad that's like the most effective. And then we're going to allocate all the budget to that ad. And so if you draw the parallel to hiring you and collaborating with you, it's the same approach. It's like, look, we're not really sure right out the gates whether the talking points for this thing is going to be the most effective way to drive awareness, to drive conversions, et cetera. And so we need to have multiple at-bats here to really hone in on what's resonating with my community. And so I think just kind of drawing parallels to what they understand in terms of other ways in which they're allocating their marketing capital can be a game changer.
Yes, love, 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 all of that. Justin, thank you so much. It's time to close the show. So where should people follow you? They should absolutely get your book. Look at all of these markers, just and halfway through only. So definitely get Justin's book, Sponsor Magnet, where can they get it?
Yeah, so sponsormagnet.com is the best place. We literally just scratch the surface of like what I cover in the book. And so if you're a podcaster who like I said, is either sponsorship skeptical, sponsorship curious, or maybe you're doing a bunch of sponsorships already. This book is for you. I've distilled 15 years plus of everything I know about doing millions of dollars worth of deals myself, but also paying out millions of dollars to other creators. And so it's really the book that I wish I had when I started out. And so, yeah, sponsormagnet.com.
Awesome. And definitely you talk about pricing here, which we did not cover, that we know people are going to have a lot of questions about. And then where can they find out more about your coaching program, and where do you normally hang out on social media?
Well, you know what? I wouldn't be a good podcaster. I wouldn't be a good creator if I gave multiple calls to action. The only place to go is sponsormagnet.com. You'll go down the rabbit hole if you want to learn more about me by sponsormagnet.com. So I'm not going to tell you anything else.
Fair. Justin, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right. And for you listening, everything that we mentioned in this podcast episode is going to be in the show notes. Visit thepodcastspace.com for all the resources that you ever may need in your lifetime and more. Curious or not, just go there. I've been Anna Xavier. This was the Podcast Space, and keep creating imperfect content that moves you forward. I'll see you in the next episode.